Good morning, everyone. My name is Reverend Ronald Tuff, and I am the host moderator for the workshop on climate change and the effects of the green economy. I do have a panel this morning, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and then we'll come back to me, and I will ask them a set of questions. Rick, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Pastor. And good afternoon or good morning, everyone. My name is Rick Thigpen. I am the Senior Vice President for Corporate Citizenship at PSEG, which I like to refer to as your favorite public utility. In that capacity, I have responsibility for federal, state, and local government relations, our community relations, as well as our charitable activities, and increasingly our responsibilities for a topic that Wall Street calls ESG, issues that involve environment, social, and governance considerations and how they relate to a more sustainable success for a corporation.
Crystal.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Reverend. My name is Crystal Pruitt. I am the Deputy Director in the Division of Clean Energy within the Board of Public Utilities, and specifically, I run the new Office of Clean Energy Equity as a response to the need to really look at how we address our energy and our clean energy programs and making sure that all residents have appropriate access. This office was created to ensure that everyone has access equally and equitably. So great to be here.
Duan, I'm sorry.
No worries. It's Duan Bogert. Good morning, fellow panelists. Good morning, Reverend. Good morning, all who are listening. I'm the Executive Director for the Passaic County Workforce Development Board. What is a Workforce Development Board? I'll give you a quick snippet. So we are the connection between the workforce and economic development to help residents in local areas find jobs and ensure that employers have skilled workers that help grow and complete and prosper their business. Just to give you an idea of some of the things that we do, we provide the strategic direction for the Passaic County one-stop system. We help and analyze and discuss critical workforce issues to determine the best implementation strategies. So today is a great topic that we're going to be talking about as far as clean energy jobs. So that's an example of what we do here.
Exactly. But first, before we get into the jobs aspect, I want to first just get a statement from each of you as it relates to clean energy and how it affects the low and moderate and minority areas. Rick, I'm going to start with you. And then after we get those statements, then we'll come back and talk about where are we as it relates to the jobs. But let's first talk about how does this climate change affect our low and moderate and minority communities? Rick?
Thank you, Reverend Tuff. And I'm always nervous to go ahead of my regulator on topics like this, but thank you for putting me in that position. So first off, this is a very important subject. It's worth mentioning I am also the chair of the Legislative Issues and Public Policy Committee for the American Association of Blacks in Energy, which is a national organization. So this is a topic where I have the opportunity to spend some time, and it is a very, very important topic because number one, the scientists have made clear at the international level as well as at the national level that climate change poses a clear and present danger and that it is human behavior that is accelerating the impacts of it, and that if we don't take action to mitigate those changes, we are going to face increasingly severe consequences, many of which we have already begun to taste. Hurricane Katrina is an example of how a storm disaster powered by climate change, making storms more powerful, can have a disproportionate effect on low and moderate income communities, which because of our distinct American history, frequently includes overrepresentation of people of color. So I don't want to directly equate low and moderate income with people of color, but we do know that we are very, very well represented in that portion of the population. And so it does make sense to have some a connection between the two. Having said that, climate change poses a very severe threat to all of us. And the less fortunate of your economic circumstances, the more vulnerable you are to severe weather events. It was, generally speaking, not the more affluent who were trapped in basements that flooded or who experienced the most severe consequences of the recent storm Ida, which did exacerbate flooding in many areas. It is also very clear that cleaner energy is more expensive than dirtier energy, so that all efforts to mitigate, to take steps to decarbonize our economy and reduce our air emissions in order to protect ourselves for the future can have a disproportionate impact on people depending on their income. And the lower your income, the more vulnerable you are to the price increases that come with the transition to the clean energy economy if we're not careful.
Yep.
So this can necessitate a whole range of considerations for us. But I also want to step back to another sort of more political theme of how we move into the future of a clean energy economy. Public service prides itself as being a clean energy infrastructure company. And we operate, hopefully Crystal will endorse this, in line with public policy. And I say that half jokingly, but it's also a very serious statement, in that our governor has talked about a stronger and fairer economy. And public service does recognize that, in fact, as we move into the future, there are going to have to be some specific steps taken in public policy support to ensure, as Crystal mentioned before, that the future features the word equity and policies are more equitable in the future than many of us believe that they have been in the past. Sometimes that takes specific considerations. It will take things that we'll talk about today, like preparation for the workforce for people who have not been exposed to the proper education. But it also requires corporations to be conscious of public policy needs and to adopt procurement practices and hiring practices that purposefully create opportunity for those who have in the past been left out in the economy. And sometimes it requires extra expenditures to help prepare those people who've been left out to participate like those who have been cut into the economy in the past. So there's a whole host of considerations with the transition to the clean energy economy. In my mother's words, Reverend, the most important thing here is for us to make a virtue out of a necessity. It's an absolute necessity to address climate change and to move into a clean energy economy. And we can turn this into a virtue. And Crystal and I have had some experience trying to tackle some of those issues by purposely creating opportunity in the clean energy economy and purposely adopting public policies to bring people into the clean energy economy.
Thank you so much. Crystal?
Thank you, Reverend, and thank you, Rick, for such a good lead-in, I guess, to the importance of clean energy. So, Reverend, to your question of why does clean energy matter when we're having this conversation at the Black Issues Convention? What does it mean? How do we tie it in? So in my role, it's been very important to have conversations internally, and when I'm able to speak externally in the energy spaces, to make it very clear that for so long, people have thought about energy, the environment, and so on and so forth as this kind of race neutral or just neutral thing. And I've been here to kind of explain that it is very much in line with social justice. It is a social justice issue about how we get energy. It's a social justice issue about, how we deploy clean energy and who has access to it and who can afford it. As Rick mentioned, climate change, global warming is real and it's happening, and we see the consequences of it every day. We've seen it in Ida. We've seen it in this record heat waves that we've been having. And from these massive storms to just higher temperatures, it is low and moderate income and Black and Brown communities where they overlap that, are victims of this disproportionately more than upper middle class and upper middle class whites. So in this conversation, we need to make it very clear when we're talking about energy, it's not just this we flip the lights on and we turn on our stove and like there's no, economic or racial thought, but there really is, because not everyone has the same access to energy. And we didn't even get to begin to talk about energy burden, in the sense that what you pay in energy can be disproportionately more if you're low and moderate income or a person of color. So it's taking up more of your actual hard-earned money, and you might be actually getting less. So when we're talking about energy and clean energy, we're looking to, one, tackle things like emissions issues and of course the global warming crisis, but we're also talking about energy efficiency and how low and moderate income folks can get more bang for their buck in terms of how much of their energy use and the decreasing of their bills. We're talking about decarbonization and electrification, again, to make things more efficient. So not only are we doing things to protect the environment and reducing, our reliance on perhaps maybe dirty energy and focusing on clean energy, we're also providing an economic pathway to help people. And that economic pathway also kind of segues into what we're going to talk about later, which is the green economy and getting people involved in, the workforce pathway. But when we're talking about clean energy, we're talking about making sure that everyone has access to it and that certain people aren't left behind, because let's make it very clear, due to redlining, due to government decisions, there have been communities that have been negatively impacted, disproportionately negative impacted by, things like peaker plants and factories and poor air quality and poor water quality. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to clean that up, and we're trying to right the systemic and the institutional wrongs that have been levied at these people. And we're kind of taking ownership, at least. I think the Murphy administration and, the BPU are looking at the historical the historical background of everything that is happening, and we're looking to make it right, because we can't address global warming, we can't address 100% clean energy by 2050 unless everybody is involved, and that's including people who have been historically left behind, disadvantaged, and disenfranchised. So the office that I had is looking specifically at those communities to lift them up, to make sure that they are coming along with us, and if we have to provide them more incentives and do more to support them, that's what equity is. So big picture, clean energy, social justice.
Dawad, close it out.
First, I'd like to say, Rick and Crystal, you guys set the bar really high, and I love that. So when we talk about clean energy, the importance, and we talk about urban areas, I'm a native son of Patterson, New Jersey, 4th Ward. So I understand urban areas. I understand heat waves. I understand floods. I understand how, these climate changes have evolved, since I was a young man. And I look at, some of the issues that are deriving, and a lot of it breaks down to, some of the politics, as Rick mentioned. Are our counties, cities, really collaborating appropriately to better the urban areas? Are we creating, using some of the smart ideas that are out there, like China, like sponge cities that are using some of this overflow water in the appropriate way, opposed to having these floods and having these other issues? And some of it boils down to our buildings up to code. And is that part of the policies and procedures that are going to be put in place to better the urban areas? And once again, does that turn into jobs? Does that translate into work opportunities, career path opportunities through different grants and funding? When we talk about, the clean energy wave, I get really excited because I see nothing but opportunity. I think about it as when the tech industry first got up and running, and the opportunities that are there. Now, the reality is, when you look at it about Black and brown and women, some of our minority populations, they are once again, they're just underrepresented in the clean energy space right now. And we need to do more for that. We need to do more to better that. And I think by bettering our urban areas and preparing them for these global climate changes by utilizing smart solutions, by, as I said before, getting these buildings up to code, by creating those sponge cities and these innovative ideas. I mean, once again, if we look around the world, this is being done already. And it's being done successful in some other places. We need to utilize some of those ideas, but we need to start, it needs to start at the local level. You know, New York City is taking some steps, and there's still more they can take. But why aren't we taking those same steps in some of our urban areas right here in New Jersey? And why aren't we making a push to create jobs and opportunities?
Thank you. Thank you. Now we get into the crux of it, which is the jobs aspect. And I'm going to set the bar, and then we're going to start off with Crystal, but I'm going to set the bar first. Knowing that the planning for the low and moderate minority community has already been done, but understanding in solar, electric vehicles, and offshore wind, that you have to be certified, you have to be you have to go to school, and you have to be, and some of those jobs are unionized. Looking at it from those standards, and I'm going to ask Crystal to start to talk about it first, and I'm going to just give you an example. I met with 25 Black electricians, 30 years of experience. Not one of them had a license because of the requirements in order to get a license. But we also signed a contract with Charge Point. And if Charge Point said, I have 40 installations of charging stations, they couldn't do it simply because of the lack of the requirements in order to be in their profession. So I'm gonna leave it right there, and I'm gonna ask Crystal to start off because I serve on a stakeholders board with Crystal. Crystal?
Yes, thank you, Reverend. And yeah, so as Reverend Tuft alluded, Reverend Tuft is part of the EE Transition Workforce Working Group that the Board of Public Utilities has created. And we've been working, I believe, since April, kind of having these discussions and talking about these very specific barriers. So the focus of the working group is to look at specifically minority women and minority women and veteran folks in trying to get them within the pipeline. So what the Reverend is talking or just spoke on is one of the things that we have been working on and trying to bring people to the table, including the utilities and the unions, to figure out how we connect folks with the missing certifications so we can get them on the pathway that they need to be, because we recognize that, you know, our people are always going to do what they need to do to be able to pay their bills, right? That they're going to figure it out. But what we want to do is bring them into the light. We want to make sure that they have their licenses and their certifications, and, you know, figuring out how we get that accomplished. What wraparound services can we provide? What educational services we provide? And the example that the Reverend was speaking on, one of the major hurdles for, I guess, the certification that he's referencing is algebra, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to have passed high school algebra. And for so many people, right, that may have not been a reality. They may have had to leave school before they got to algebra because they had to work, or their school just unfortunately didn't really have a strong algebra program or a maths program. So it's kind of tackling these things and realizing and acknowledging the whole systemic issue that's involved, because now we have to focus on education, right? We have to figure out the gaps in education. We have to connect people with the education that they were without, so they can prove their certification, so they can take the test to involve the union. And that's some of the work that we're engaging with actively right now in the working group, is to bring these partners to the table, acknowledge that this is happening, and agree that we're going to work on it to fix it. So I think that's just one of the really specific and barriers that does keep coming up when we have conversations about getting people engaged in the pipeline, is the educational component. And also supporting the people that are already doing the work without the license to make sure that they can be a part of a more formalized pipeline.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Rick, you guys got 2,000 jobs. How do we get the people involved with the knowing what Crystal prefaced with and what I prefaced with?
Okay, so first of all, let me step back just a minute, Reverend, and say, yes, public service has 2,000 jobs for energy efficiency work, which are green jobs designed to create opportunity along the lines we're talking about. And as Crystal said, so I can be a little bit more specific, and I am very proud of it because first off, people I know through the Black Issues Convention and our state legislative Black caucus, as well as Hispanic caucus, all took interest in this and all had their voices a part of making this a reality. And I say that to say because sometimes the fundamentals do apply. And even though you didn't ask it, voting and political participation are one of those fundamentals, and having the voices of people who are listening to this conference heard by our elected officials is an important part of this package. The fact that public service has 2,000 jobs available that are going to be focused to some degree on creating opportunity in more disadvantaged communities is a very purposeful strategy that is really very important for this conversation. And at the heart of it, first off, this opportunity in the green economy of the future is a public-private partnership. It requires public policy supported direction towards equity and fairness, and it requires private sector participation and being open to equity and fairness. And don't take either one for granted, anyone, please, because neither one comes automatically. As for our side of the table, I'm very proud that we have now hired contractors who have a contractual obligation to participate in creating jobs, and that we are working with local nonprofits to help identify people and bring people in for job training. And that Crystal mentioned, and that some of the people that are brought in from the outside for job training do require wraparound services, and those wraparound services have a cost to them, and the money has to be found to pay for those so that we can accomplish this mission, not just accomplish the lip service part of the mission. Because as you get to the ground in the implementation process, you find people have different needs. Sometimes it's transportation, sometimes it's daycare, sometimes it's other things like training, et cetera, that is a part of getting people from where they are today into the mainstream of American economic activity for the future, for today and tomorrow. So having said that, we are on the job, and we are in partnership with the BPU and in partnership with Crystal and the Office of Equity on trying to adopt a modus operandi where costs are addressed, how those costs get covered or addressed, what is the process, what's the roadmap for others who maybe don't have the same passion for doing this on their own can follow this, so that we can not only just have one or two companies do it, but have it be required. I can't tell you how many opportunities have been lost because the public sector does not mandate equity and participation. And I can't tell you how many opportunities have been lost because leaders in the private sector are only focused on a very narrow agenda that excludes making the communities which they operate better. And so we have those challenges together, which at the core are political challenges. So that's my world, and I want to make sure I mention it because this is not a little challenge, this is a big challenge. But then we have lots of specifics that we're working with our regulators at the BPU and others on how to solve, but they're all being solved in partnership, both public-private partnership, but also corporate community partnership, working with the Urban League, working with the National Action Network, and working with a whole series of other community organizations to help find people, train people, and get them on the job. And it's being made because our public policy in New Jersey drove public service down this direction. So now we have 2,000 jobs to create. We are in the process of doing it. It's really a new program. I want to call everybody's attention to it. We need all the help we can get to be successful as we solve these problems. And I think together, public service, really as a partner to our state government, are going to produce a very positive result that people are going to look at and hopefully come to expect as we go forward, that these clean energy investments also create jobs that everybody has access to, not just a certain number of people. And the last thing I'll mention very quickly, Reverend, I apologize, is that we're spending lots of money in implementing this program, and we're doing the same to make sure that the local businesses are diverse that participate, because that's the second most important way to create jobs. If I hire Crystal's hardware store in East Orange, well, guess who she's likely to hire to work at her store when she has the business? Are the same people we're trying to target. So it's not just the people we hire ourselves, it's the vendors we hire as well that can really have a purposeful, positive impact on the agenda we're talking about today. And we got to do it by working together.
Dewan, I'm glad you're on this. Now, you had the responsibility of working with the bros and the sisters and the community. Tell them how to do it.
You're on mute.
Yep, thank you. I go right back to my board's vision. Once again, we're looking to connect skilled labor and quality education with industry in demand needs. We're looking to build and invest in the workforce system. We want to create that competitive atmosphere and empower, our residents with opportunities that are going to be long lasting. Now, in saying that, I agree with Crystal and I agree with Rick. I'm going to, when it boils down to it, this is about cooperation. This is about opportunity and timing. Definitely, we as Black and Brown people need to hold, our politicians and our local administrations to a higher level, to a higher standard. There has to be a buy-in for clean energy, but there also has to be a buy-in for the community to be a part of that process, to be a part of some of those jobs and opportunities. As I mentioned in my latter discussion, it really boils down to, if we put the policies in place and we put the people in an opportunity, there are jobs, I take the word jobs away. There are career paths. There are doors that can be opened. Generational change, systemic change can happen in local areas in many of these in-demand industries. This is, clean energy is the topic of today, but when I look at what I do on a day-to-day basis, I look at the whole spectrum. When we talk about tech, we talk about computer systems, we talk about clean energy, we talk about policing. I could name a lot of opportunities to you. I could name engineering. As Rick mentioned, there has to be a level of standard when those opportunities are put out in the local area so that local residents can get betterment from it. Not just because their streets are paved or their building is put together or the AC units are there, but they can find a way to get some buy-in from those tax dollars that they are putting out. And that's just the reality. So when I say this, I say it candidly, we need to look at the policies that are there. We need to make sure that our local folks are questioning and asking their local politicians about who is doing the work, why they are doing the work, and why are we not a part of it? Because that's really where it boils down to. And now let's also just take it to another level. We need to start looking at apprenticeship opportunities and how we can get into those apprenticeship opportunities and how we can find those dollars. Crystal mentioned something that we deal with here at the One Stop and the Workforce Development Board all the time. Just getting folks prepared on the basic skills level. Even for our grant through our WIOA program, that's the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. If anybody doesn't know, 2014, that's what governs our Workforce Development Board. Now it's what funds our local One Stop so we can provide training. But some of the trainings require certain educational levels in math and reading in different areas. So we have to work with our residents to get them up to those levels. So sometimes they may want to take a particular training course, but they don't pass the basic math skills. So we'll sit down and we'll work with them. I know partners of mine in the South Jersey region who worked with an energy company whose workforce is aging out. And what did they have to do? Work with a lot of local residents, create training programs. Basically, there was private buy-in as well as there was local government buy-in. But there was a cooperation because there was a need for that workforce to be trained and be brought up, and they understood that there was going to be a time a time investment as well as a financial investment, as well as cooperation and synergy amongst that group. So in saying that, we just need to find more synergy for programs. We need to find more of our private sector partners who want to invest, and we want to make sure that we are giving true and honest opportunities to folks So that way they buy into the process that takes them down that path, because that's another thing too. A resident has to put their time and their trust in us to get them to that next level and to actually get them to the job, not just lip service. We got one or two jobs, but then it really boils down to everything is for someone else or someone who already has that particular skill set. We need to start developing. We need to start growing. And honestly, it's showing in our workforce systems, in some of the career paths that are out there, where many of those workers are starting to age out. And as they retire, there was really no plan to bring people in and to get them ready for those positions, especially from the folks who live in those local areas.
Mhm.
So.
The next question is, how do we get interest from the community? We have dedicated people like you guys who are setting up mechanisms and opening the doors for the community. But if you go through the community, sit down and talk to them and say, hey, why aren't you knocking on the door? Crystal, how do we get the community fired up as it relates to getting into this industry? Because when I go to a meeting and it's about climate change, jobs, I'm the only minority in the room. Crystal, how do we get the community fired up?
So I think this is a two-part answer that I have. So for the first part, when we talk about how we get the community fired up, and you're saying you're going to these meetings and you're only a person of color there, I think it's, we have a responsibility, and I include myself in the I guess the industry folks, to meet people where they are and help people understand why this impacts them. So a lot of times we'll throw out, and I am guilty of it because I think I did it in my first answer, emissions and greenhouse gases, and that's not how real people talk, right? Like, we need to talk about air quality, right? We need to talk about access to clean water, soil quality, what's in your buildings, and help people connect the everyday to what we're talking about when we're talking about energy, clean energy, global warming, right? And I think a lot of that work is actually starting to get really tackled by the Department of Environmental Protection and their Environmental Justice Advocacy Council. And how to kind of connect that to people. Another way is to speak to people in terms of economic needs. So when we're having conversations about energy efficiency, we're talking about it in terms of bill savings, right? How can we save you money? And the added benefit is that we're also going to help the environment. So it's understanding how you're messaging. And there is, for better or worse, a bit of gatekeeping when we talk about environmental issues. It still very much seems this kind of paternalistic, we're going to tell you what we need, and we don't listen to people. So I guess the second part is, trying to get our community excited is just listening to our community and being in our community and asking the community, right? And I'm pretty sure, Reverend, you do this. How do we get you engaged? Like, what do you need to get you through the door outside of speaking in language that is not overly technical and gobbledygook? Because Reverend, you hear me where I'm just like, I need you to say all that again in normal human language, no technical terms. But it's a two-way street where it's just like, at least in my ethos, is that I'm not coming into community to tell them what they need and what clean energy they need. I need to communicate and meet them where they are at and hear them back what they need. And then taking what they need and my professional background and meeting in the middle to come up with solutions, right? So it is a two-way street. And I guess that's kind of my answer. Okay. It's just like asking the community, well, why don't you see this on your radar?
Right.
Like, why isn't it? Why do you think it's outside of your grasp? Is it just not something you think you'd be interested in? Well, let me tell you why you could be. Right. So it's listening. And I don't know if that's maybe too naive, but that's at least That's kind of the point of view that we're taking, and I think it's really speaks volumes to the Murphy administration and the board, through the Murphy administration, this idea of making things accessible and affordable and going to communities and understanding their needs and listening to them, because we can't keep telling Black and Brown communities what they need and not listening to them.
Absolutely.
So.
Rick, you got put PSC&G 2,000 jobs. I can't get there. The bus doesn't run. I don't have babysitting. There are other barriers that are just unmentionable. There's distraught in my home. How do you address these issues when you're saying, here, we got these 2,000 jobs, come and get them?
So, excellent question. And it's really all about partnership. I'll say it again. To address these successfully, we need help, and we're getting help from the BPU as a helper. The Department of Labor has been helper. The workforce investment boards around the state are helpers. And it takes resources to help address those needs. And from where I sit, the challenge is we are trying to address problems we did not create ourselves, and that it will take resources to address them, and there's no way around that. So that's part of the challenge. Energy efficiency is something, and not just energy efficiency, but universal access to energy efficiency is also good, Reverend. So if you happen to live in the South Ward of Newark, the ideal place for us to put you to work on energy efficiency work is when we're doing it in Newark, and when we're doing the job training, we do it in Newark, so that transportation issue gets minimized. If I am trying to get you from the South Ward of Newark to do energy efficiency work in Piscataway or Branchburg, then it's a far more complicated problem, and it probably is an obstacle to your success that you need to pay attention to. So that's a very important thing. And that's a public policy matter, universal access to energy efficiency, because we all need to use less energy. We all can enjoy the benefits of having lower utility bills. I hate saying that. And we also all know that, as Crystal mentioned, because of the way electricity is generated, that you lower emissions and you improve your economy and you improve your environment by reducing individual energy consumption. So a public policy matter, universal access to energy efficiency services is very important. Not everybody in the South Ward of Newark has the money in their pocket themselves to spend on new hot water heaters, new furnaces, new windows, new doors, et cetera, et cetera. So public policy is a part of that as well. So public-private partnership, the fundamentals apply, which is if we don't vote and have our voice heard, and then your original question of how you get our community to pay greater attention. So from where I sit, I honestly know I'm no longer in a position to say I know better, but it is very clear to me that talking to the elected officials who represent these communities, talking to the faith-based leaders who represent these communities, and talking to the community organizations that do business in these communities, sort of that leadership cadre to help educate them on some of these issues is very important. From the place I sit, I would no longer consider myself capable to tell you I can do it myself to reach everybody and move them as a representative of PSC&G. But we have to be very purposeful about those partnerships so that the people who are trusted voices in these communities do have the information, have the opportunity to spread it and disseminate it in the fashion that they see fit. That's a journey we're still on, and that's a very important journey. And I just want to end this answer with the same theme I've been mentioning: partnership, partnership, partnership. There's a very important role for the public sector company, but we are going to be most successful by working together to implement public policy and partnership, and to openly articulate that equity is part of the agenda of these policy measures we're trying to implement. And not everybody's on board with equity. Anybody who thinks anything different, we should talk about it. There's lots of opposition to equity.
Right.
It has to be overcome.
Dewan, your job is to bring the community to what Crystal and Rick have mentioned. And in many of the cases, it is a lack of understanding, a lack of access, and just a lack of being able to come to the table. how do you intend to partner with Rick and Crystal in order to make what you do work?
Well, that's a good question. And when we really boil down to what a workforce development board is, it really boils down to partnership. That's the word. I heard Rick say it a couple of times, and I'm smiling because partnership and synergy is what we do here. That's how we get our message across when it comes to literacy, education, when it comes to our, our faith base, when it comes to our health and human services partners. So even in this particular space, I think we have to create the same type of segue. We need to break it down, as many of you have said during this portion, into a common theme. We need to break it down to some of the simple needs that people are dealing with, and how these opportunities will fix some of those needs for yourself, for the community, for your job, and how they all intertwine. Sometimes I find when we're speaking to the community, we need to give them the full path. We need to break it down and explain to them, here's where we are going to start, here's where we're trying to get to, and here are some simple steps we're going to do in the middle. And I think a lot of people want to understand that, and they don't want to just hear about comprehensive plans and strategic alignment and and forecasting. They want to know, what do I need to do?
Yep.
Where is it going to take me, and
Yep.
how is it going to affect my family in my local area? And sometimes it's really in that order. People want to know where's the buy-in, and who's the person buying it, and why are they buying it. And that's what a lot of our advocacy subcommittees do. We reach out and we have these conversations. So we have a faith-based subcommittee with our board. We have a healthcare subcommittee. We have subcommittees for in-demand industry. We have a whole in-demand industry council, as well as we partner with North Jersey Partners, which is a group of workforce development professionals, including one-stops and workforce development boards all over North Jersey. And we have conversations like these about sustainable energy, about our apprenticeship opportunities. We bring it to the youth. That's another thing that we do. We're making these kids a little bit more excited about the jobs of the future. And, because these are the jobs of now, but there are going to be more of these jobs in the future. They're going to be more detailed. And there's going to be more strategy and more education that they're going to need as they move forward. As well as we're trying to bring it to our local residents. Some of these, because when we look at unemployment right now, just in Passaic County, between 18 and 34 is about 80% of the unemployed right now. And now at 80%, about 80% of those folks have less than high school or just high school education. So now we're talking about young, undereducated folks who need things broken down to them in a nice, simple format. And they also need that buy-in, because we went through a process where we were telling kids, well, I'm not a kid anymore, but they were telling kids my age, hey, get out and vote, rock the vote, get out and vote. We have to keep doing that. We have to keep telling them about advocacy. We have to keep telling them how much their vote matters. I hear so many young people who are 18 to 25 who just think their vote goes into the wastebasket. I probably use another word, but I'm going to say the wastebasket. So we need we need to explain how valuable their voices are, because we keep these elected officials involved, and getting our elected officials involved. That's another thing too. And we do that here with the Workforce Development Board. We do work with our assembly people. We do work with the local mayors and municipalities. We want that buy-in, because at the end of the day, and I'll say it again, it's all about synergy. It's all about creating a system that benefits not just individuals, not just the employer, not just the municipality, but the whole system, because that keeps everything flowing in the direction that we need to go in. Now, when it comes down to the Black and Brown community, I know I'm happy that we're all here in some areas of leadership, because I think that's another thing. It makes people feel comfortable. And I have no problem telling people I'm from Patterson. I'm from Patterson, New Jersey. That's where I came from. That's where I got my education at. I came back here. I didn't run off to, Michigan. I came back here because this is where I want to be a leader at. And I work with our reentry community. A lot of times that's a big buy-in because they know I'm from here. This is what I believe in this area. I tell them all the time, my mother is about 5 blocks that way, 4 blocks over. She's right there. That's where she lives from my office. I could probably see her from here if I look out the window hard enough. But that's one of those things that buy in as well as follow through. Now that's where I'm going to end it. We have to follow through.
Lastly, we got I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes. Start off with Crystal. I just want to address the question, and I know, Crystal, we haven't talked about it much, but I just want to address the question of unionism. Where are we in our community and what we're doing with unionism? So, Crystal, can you? And I know 2 minutes is kind of short, but can you address that?
I can certainly do the best that I can within the 2-minute time frame. So I think, there's a couple things to unpack, I think, in your question, Reverend. It's the kind of, I guess, the racial historic issues, I think, with our community and unions. I think there's the how we get engaged in unions, and I mean the global we. So I think, it's having them at the table, and similar to the format that we're kind of working on it right now, is making sure they're at the table, making sure we have our community at the table, and we have, the government entities and the regulators at the table to have conversations about this is where the future is going, and in order for all of us to survive, we all have to be on the same team. We all have to have buy-in. We all have to move forward together. So we need to acknowledge, any discord that we may have had in the past. And we need to figure out a game plan to move forward together, because in this clean energy economy, there's work that's going to need to be done. And if we aren't included, it's not going to get done in the same numbers that it could and it should. So I think that's really, really high level, because that's obviously an issue that we're trying to unpack in real time in our conversations.
Right.
Within the working group. So I will just kind of leave it at that. But it's recognizing that I feel each stakeholder that's at the table is bringing their own concerns, their own historical context, their own baggage, and we have to unpack all that together in order to move forward.
Thank you. Rick, where are we with unionism in your 2,000 jobs?
So that's a very interesting conversation. So first off, Public Service is a clean energy infrastructure company, and we rely very, very heavily on union labor, number one. Number two, I heard Crystal, and it is a complicated subject. So on energy efficiency, we have, a limited number of union jobs that we are talking about in the job training program we just discussed. However, I will say to you that as a clean energy infrastructure company, we have now convened conversations with our union leaders about this very topic. And I am very pleased to report to everyone here that our union leadership, our building trades partners, our International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers partners, our laborers partners, and our operating engineers partners have all indicated to us the recognition that the future requires greater diversity in the union workforce than we've seen in the past, and that they are prepared to walk down the road with us for a program designed to create new opportunities for people. We think it's something that there's a lot to talk about. The essential element of this is partnership, that the public sector supports it and voices its support for this direction, and that a private sector corporation who's actually responsible for the job creation itself is also on board with it. Together, we are going to make unionism one of the partners for a cleaner energy future that's more equitable. I would not be accurate to say that there may be some challenges to getting there, but they are a very important stakeholder in New Jersey, and leaving them out would delay progress. And I look forward to working effectively with them to create new opportunities in the future. And I'm one to admit, we haven't always seen those opportunities having been created in the past. So I recognize there's a certain amount of skepticism that comes with hearing these words.
Thank you. Dwan, unionism.
Unionism. I mean, when it boils down to it, I think it's for some people the gold standard when they're looking at a career path and what they're looking for as far as security. I mean, once again, freedom of speech, freedom of workers to assemble, freedom to petition to readdress grievances. I mean, you're talking about something that many of us grew up on, many of us saw our parents and grandparents be a part of. And, once again, we're seeing it, but we're not seeing it in enough industries anymore. I will also say from a workforce development standpoint, it will be exciting to see this become a more of a union type of industry with the green jobs. We have an in-demand industry council here built up of many of the unions, from Verizon to the electricians to the carpenters. We work with all of them. I mean, once again, they're great shops. And I also feel that they're shops that we're trying to introduce more of our urban partners and our urban residents to, and make sure that those opportunities are clear and open for them. So in saying that, I think the sword sometimes does cut both ways. Depending how the union shops are put together, depending where the opportunities are placed. As long as it's fair and equitable, I think it's something that everyone wants to build for. And I think that's the other standard that we have to hold those partners to: fair and equitable opportunities for residents.
Thank you. One last statement, starting with Crystal, real quick. One last statement. Where's the hope? Real quick statement. So
no, I mean the hope is right now, and the hope is in the future, right? Because unless we start acting right now to build a foundation to make sure that's in place, we time is ticking when it comes to global concerns and climate change, and what that will do to our economy, what that will do to our communities. So I think the hope is that we can make a difference. The hope is that politicians are finally heeding the words of our community and listening and acknowledging there's inequities in meaningful ways by creating the office that I now run and bringing me on board. You have, I guess, corporate responsibility of Rick and his work with PSC&G trying to do that. The hope is that we have the time and the space and the attention of the people. And our hope is that we keep it. And our hope is that we make the changes that we can make right now.
Thank you. Rick, where's the hope? Real quick.
That's a tough one to follow. So hope is in voting. It all starts with our participation in the political process, which is going to set the direction of public policy, which is going to dictate the success or failure of the things we're talking about. And we are voting in greater numbers. There's more and more of us in elected and appointed offices in greater numbers. Crystal is a perfect example of it, and so is Dewan. And then there's hope in the private sector, and with the arrival of people like myself, that our voices are going to be heard in the corridors of power. There's hope that more and more people are recognizing that the necessity of working together in the future is a key to our collective prosperity. There's hope that the pandemic has taught us that we're tied together, whether we like it or not, and that leaving people out is not the wisest policy. And there's hope that the future is brighter, but we'd be remiss not to ignore the warnings that our previous president have given us, that there's also lots of people who'd like to see us turn our eyes backwards, not forwards together. But if we vote, we can change things.
Duan, where's the hope? Real quick.
The hope, I always say this, the hope is in our kids and our future. That's where the hope is, keeping them educated, creating these opportunities and fair pathways. The hope also is for anyone who's listening to us today. That's the hope. If we can get a few people, hopefully we get everybody, but we can get a few people to take not just the words that we have and bring it back but put some action to it. Bring it back to the community, create a partnership, create a conversation, create a discussion that your politicians can hear. I think that's where the hope is.
I want to thank my panel, Rick, Crystal, and Dewan. And for all those that are listening, I want to thank you so much for tuning us in. And as you can see, climate change is very, very important to our community. And you can see the low and moderate minority community has a stake at the table. I want to thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you.